Well, as you would note, unfortunately, right now, some fundamentalists or some versions of Christianity have not been friendly to science. On the whole, do you feel like Christianity has been good for science or bad in the last several hundred years?
Well, let's go back a few centuries. We would not have, I think, the success of science were it not for the Christian view that the universe created by God is an orderly universe and therefore has the kind of principles behind it that we, with our puny minds, might be able to discover and have done so. And when you look at many of the great discoveries happening about how physics and chemistry work, they were made by Christians who had this confidence that what they were doing was uncovering a little glimpse of God's mind, and in the process being able not only to be excited as human beings, but also to be worshiping God Almighty. That's how I view science. It's a chance to discover what God has done and also to worship Him. But along the way, a lot of that sort of general focus by Christians has gotten lost. And it is unfortunate now that I think many Christian young people see science as perhaps not a friendly place for them to go. And so increasingly, over the last 100 years or so, science has been populated more and more by secular views. And the idea that Christians would find this as a place to carry out their life's work is a harder one for a lot of young people to see. And that's a terrible tragedy. If we want to have a future where the scientific and spiritual worldviews are both embraced, supported, nurtured, then we need to have people who have both of those worldviews working on the many problems that face our world. And I'm afraid the extreme voices that we've been talking about have made it seem inhospitable for that kind of experience. And that's a terrible, unfortunate, and unnecessary tragedy, not created by God, but created by us humans, who always seem to find a way to take something beautiful and harmonious and turn it into a fight.
Right. Well, you have mentioned Tim Keller, you've mentioned C.S. Lewis, you've mentioned, I think it was Darrell Bach. Anybody else that you would point to as a good read, or somebody that has been a hero of yours, even going back, a couple hundred years, that's fine, but what would you suggest?
Well, certainly in the scientific arena, going back a few hundred years, you can't help but admire the brilliance and the dedication and devotion of an Isaac Newton, for instance. And in terms of writers today that I think students can resonate with who are scientists, Darrell Falk, F-A-L-K,
okay.
Wrote this wonderful book called Coming to Peace with Science that I would say is the first place I would. There are others, including Ken Miller at Brown University, a book called Finding Darwin's God, which also puts forward, from his Catholic perspective, the synthesis between what science is teaching us about biology and God as the creator in a very compelling way. So there are resources out there. They're just not as broadly read, I guess, as some of the more extreme perspectives of, say, a Dawkins or a Hitchens or a Harris or a Daniel Dennett, and that's a pity.
Right, that's good. Well, actually, Dr. Collins, this has been magnificent. This gives us everything that we need. If I could just get us to close here by, it would be good if you would be willing to. I'd love for you to address the Summit Church as a whole, or specifically, young students in the church, and just give them a word of admonition. If I could be selfish here for a minute, I'd love for you to actually use the phrase Summit Church so they would know this isn't something I just ripped off of YouTube, but they're actually hearing directly from you. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, just give them a word of admonition about going into science and the confidence or whatever's on your mind there.
So let me say a word to particularly young people at Summit Church. This is a wonderful time to be involved in science. So many opportunities that we could only have dreamed of a few decades ago are now becoming possible, particularly in biology. This is going to be the century of biology and medicine. And we need people to come into that field with lots of energy and an adventuresome spirit and a dedication to serve humanity and a sense of ethics to be sure that we take these discoveries and apply them in a way that provides maximum benefit to as many people as possible. I think we particularly need people of faith to come into this environment and pursue their life's work in science. There's many ways that can be beneficial to serving, and I think that's what we are all called to do. And so if somebody listening to this has that interest and is worried that somehow science is going to cause you to lose your faith because you'll be converted into this secularist, atheistic view, don't worry. For me, who was once an atheist and became a believer in my 20s and have now lived in this scientific environment for 3 decades, it only strengthens my faith to be able to work in a scientific arena and see the wonders of God's creation. And that is a privilege and a pleasure and an opportunity of worship every day.